Let us speak then of fairy tales. If you think they're meant for children, you have missed the power in these pint-sized gems. Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Carl Jung's most revered students, made it her life's work to study these stories in depth. In her book, The Interpretation of Fairy Tales, she explains that it is in fairy tales that one can best study the comparative anatomy of the psyche. Von Franz points out that, much like a dream, which can be compensatory in that it reveals what is imbalanced in an individual psyche, fairy tales reveal what is missing in the collective psyche. Working with these stories allows us to peek inside to what is making us bleed, metaphorically, of course. We want to change the world, and so we address it through the politics of the day, but maybe we need to look at what the psyche has to say instead. So let's explore a fairy tale collected by Hans Christian Andersen called The Tinder Box to see how this might work out. I will look specifically at one aspect that is explored in this tale, the theme of descent. One way to understand these stories is to find corresponding themes in other tales or in myth. In this case, I will also look at the theme of descent that appears in the Sumerian myth of Inanna to see what that has to tell us as well. So let's begin at the beginning with the title of the story. A tinderbox or a matchbox allows us to create fire, and fire, as von Franz reminds us, is a creative element, something that transforms one thing into something else. Fire can be used to illuminate or bring awareness to something that has hitherto been in the dark. Prometheus steals fire from the gods to give to humans and pays dearly for it, as he is punished by having his liver pecked out every night. The gods don't want humans to be endowed with the power of creation, but Prometheus knows we need it to evolve. So here are the bare bones of this particular tale. It begins with a soldier making his way home after the wars. He is unnamed, unlike his counterpart in myth, Odysseus, whose story is also about how he makes his way home after the Battle of Troy. We know nothing about this soldier apart from the fact that he is carrying a sword. The sword is, of course, a prime symbol of what we associate with the masculine or the active principle in our psyches. This part is very good at discernment. It can cut away at things to reveal what is important. The soldier bumps into a witch, a symbol of the shadow side of the feminine, the yin aspect in our psyches. Even though it is the more challenging aspect of the feminine, she can also be seen as an impetus for growth. The witch is that aspect of our psyches that provides that bump to get us moving along to a new state of consciousness. And she wants her full commitment, not a wishy-washy, half-baked approach. Now the witch tells the soldier to go into the trunk of a tree and descend, where he will find a matchbox that belongs to her, and where he can take anything else he finds for himself. The soldier descends and finds 3 dogs guarding different treasures, pennies, silver, and gold, and he proceeds to fill his pockets with the gold and retrieves the matchbox for the witch. So let's stop here and look at the theme of descent. In the myth of Inanna, we are told that she descends into the underworld for the funeral of her sister Ereshkigal's husband, who is also the bull of heaven. Now, Ereshkigal is pregnant with her dead husband's child and is in mourning and is in no mood to receive the sister. Now, the reason for her rage might actually be found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you find out that Inanna, rejected by Gilgamesh, asks that the bull of heaven be released to exact revenge, and he ends up being killed by Gilgamesh and his beloved friend Enkidu instead. So is Inanna driven by guilt or compassion for her sister's suffering? No one knows for sure. But a descent is a great symbol for depression, mourning, the dark spaces we get into psychologically when we feel there is no way out. In her book, Descent of the Goddess, Sylvia Brinton Pereira argues that this is very much a part of the feminine journey, as is suffering itself. We descend to find ourselves, but it is not a given that we won't be destroyed or that we will emerge with a bounty that transformation sometimes promises. Inanna descends, is killed, and hung upside down for 3 days, and is released into the world above only once a replacement is found to take her place in the underworld. Just as in the later Greek myth of Persephone, you can't leave the underworld fully. A part of it is forever imprinted on your bones. Pereira puts it this way: we can only endure, barely conscious, barely surviving, the pain and powerlessness, suspended out of life, stuck, until and if some act of grace with some new wisdom arrives. Such raw, impersonal, though potentially initiating miseries are Ereshkigal's domain. So the soldier in our tale has undergone the feminine descent into the underworld, taken the riches he found there, offered and guarded by dogs, pointing to his instinctual side, and he now returns with a matchbox for the witch. But now his curiosity, a trait associated with the feminine, which he has assimilated with his descent, gets the better of him, and he demands that the witch tell him why she wants the matchbox. When she refuses to answer, he cuts her head off with his sword. If you take this literally, this isn't going to sit well with you at all. After all, the witch has been helpful to him, and this is the bargain they've struck. But if this story is pointing to one psyche, or a problem in the collective psyche, then the shadow side of the witch can be seen as that aspect of ourselves that trolls us with negative comments and expectations once our mission is done. She's the voice of the inner critic that just won't shut up. Cutting off the head is equivalent to depotentiating these critical thoughts. It can only be done with the discernment and the active principle in the psyche embodied by that soldier and his sword. The soldier finds that when he strikes a match, he can summon the dogs he found during his descent to fetch whatever he wants, riches, and eventually, hearing of a princess trapped in a round tower by her parents, he aims his attention on her instead. The dogs take him to her, and overwhelmed by her beauty, he kisses her and returns her to the tower. He does this a number of times until he is caught, sentenced to death, and is saved by striking a match and summoning the dogs to save him from his fate. They kill the parents and everyone else who's about to put him to death, and then he marries the princess. Again, a literal interpretation of this tale would make it seem insane, but if you look at it from the perspective that something has gone missing in that particular collective psyche, then it begins to make sense. The young developing feminine is trapped in a round tower. The tower is itself symbolic of wholeness, and it is that part of himself the soldier must connect with. She is asleep or unconscious in the tower and in his psyche, and it is his job to wake her up. The parents, or the old order inside of him, have been dispensed with, and he is free to marry the girl or integrate that yin connecting energy into his psyche and to become whole. Now, if it is true as von Franz says that fairy tales mirror the basic patterns of the psyche, then what does it mean when we have the feminine, that connecting part of us, that imaginal side, locked up in a tower, unconscious? It can't be good. As Robert Johnson points out, most growth comes from the feminine element in a myth. If you have that trapped in a tower, as the culture does, it becomes a wasteland. During those times in our lives when we are grief-struck or brought down by a depression, this tale gives us a clue as to what must be done to reconnect with the world of the living and bring a spark back into our lives. We must descend into the unconscious and suffer our stay there like Inanna, and return with a matchbox that will allow us to create a new reality, to reanimate our lives. Sometimes we are forced to descend by our circumstances, dragged there by some inner darkness or the grief delivered by blows from the world, and sometimes we go willingly, looking for that spark. But regardless, we must make the journey or be consumed by whatever has us in its grips. It is not an easy journey, nor is success guaranteed. But if we're able to retrieve that matchbox, a new awareness will enliven and inspire us and help us take a step in a new direction.